Greetings to all in the love and light of the one infinite creator, and welcome to the 10th episode of the Seattle Law of One podcast. Today's episode is about reality. Anyone who has seen the first Matrix movie probably remembers the part where Neo, the main character, is given a choice between taking a red pill to see reality as it really is, or a blue pill to remain in a comfortable illusion. It's a powerful movie metaphor that's still referenced frequently in conversations today about the nature of reality 25 years after the movie's release in 1999. So what is reality according to the Law of One? Let's find out. My name is Jonathan Tong, and I'm facilitator for the Seattle Law of One study group. We can be found on the list of study groups at the L&L Research website. We do also have a Facebook page, and we do meet on Zoom twice a week. We meet Tuesdays, 3 to 5 p.m., and Saturdays, 8 to 10 a.m. Pacific time. You don't have to live in Seattle or anywhere near Seattle to join our Facebook group or our Zoom sessions. Anyone who's interested and available is welcome to join. Just contact us at seattlelawofone@gmail.com to get on our mailing list. We send out weekly updates to let you know what we're doing that week, along with the Zoom links. We do also have a YouTube channel where we keep recordings of podcast episodes, as well as Q&A sessions with Jim McCarty, Gary Bean, Trisha Bean, and Austin Bridges from the L&L Research Channeling team. Again, you can contact us at seattlelawofone.com if you would like to join any of these Q&A sessions or our regular sessions. If you're watching this on TV, we do break the episodes into chapters, so you can skip to different chapters as suits your needs if you don't want to watch the whole thing beginning to end. And if you're watching on computer, you should see a list of topics and timestamps below. You can click on the timestamps to skip to the topics as suits your interest. So as mentioned, today our episode is on reality, and today we have just one very special guest, and that is Mr. Gabriel Lugo. Gabe describes himself as a non-dual mentor, helping seekers of self-realization through the direct path. He has been strongly influenced by Zen and Buddhist traditions, and of course by the Law of One. And as many of our viewers probably know already, Gabe has a YouTube channel with many great videos about the Law of One that have helped many folks greatly in their spiritual growth and evolution, including a series of discussions on all 106 sessions of the Raw Contact in Spanish. It is such an honor and a joy to hang out with you today, Gabe. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Jonathan. Thank you so much for inviting me into this space that we share together and for making such a beautiful introduction to what I've been doing for the past 4 or 5 years almost. So, yeah, I'm excited to chat with you to get this discussion going and to delve together deep into this topic of reality. I have so many beautiful things to say about it. So, thank you.
Thank you. And I am looking forward to the conversation as well. So why don't we go ahead? I should note that pretty much all of the passages that we're looking at today are coming from the entity known as Quo. The L&L research team first made contact with Quo in 1986, about 2 years after the end of the Raw contact. So Quo has identified themselves as a group entity made up of 3 social memory complexes: Ra at 6th density, Latui at 5th density, and Hatan at 4th density. So they are generally a group of 3 different social memory complexes together. So I wanted to look at some passages relating to just what is reality. I've got 2 I think I wanted to bounce off you and see what you think, Gabe. The first one was from August 19th in 1984, and Quo said, "We say to you, my friends, you dwell in a universe so beautiful, so harmonious, so unified, so totally full of love, that words are never enough to begin to acquaint you with the character of that which you may call reality. You experience one reality by its very nature, has the potential of transcending space and time. That is the sexual orgasm. If you could imagine this experience as a steady state, you would begin to understand the character and the nature of reality. There is a great hunger to experience this in each seeker, and we encourage this hunger. We urge you forward. Once you have experienced one moment of this reality, you will not subjectively doubt the validity of your seeking. The strength of the universe is one, its fragrance, its beauty, its joy are one. The experience of this one original thought will continue to be available, and we urge you to pursue it in meditation, in vision, and by dedication of the self in whatever state and in whatever experience within your illusion to the seeking of reality, if we may use that term. For truly, we speak relatively. We know a bit more than you, as we have experienced more, but for us to talk of reality would be foolish, for we have not seen the end and the beginning, nor have our teachers. The mystery of the universe remains hidden in the Creator, and therefore hidden in all of us. What do you have, my friends, that may seek, that you may trust more than your mind? What shall be the master of your mind? As you seek reality, we ask you to ponder this question, for in the seeker, the mind is grossly misused very often, and the far-seeing vision within is cut off, downplayed, and mistrusted. Great passage to start off the discussion with. I would say defining reality as being like an orgasm. That's just not something you really hear a lot in metaphysical groups or discussions. And I just think it's a fascinating thing that they have actually said more than a few times. This is just one example of it. But I guess it kind of brings to mind how they've talked about how if the universe really exists in a steady state of sexual orgasm, then apparently the first distortion was, if I recall correctly, free will, where the one infinite creator decided to distort itself in order to learn more about the possibilities of separation from oneness. And that led to the second distortion of love, which I guess kind of makes sense. You could see love as a outgrowth of whatever you might describe as that experience of a sexual orgasm. And that led to the third distortion of light, which is a beautiful way of thinking of light as a distortion of love. I think that's just a beautiful thing. Any thoughts on this, Gabe? Any thoughts, reflections on anything from this passage?
Oh, so much, Jonathan. Like you picked such a beautiful passage here, and the from beginning to end, I think the ending is really what strikes me the most, right? Um, First, they describe how reality actually cannot be described, right? So, and it makes sense because if we see in our traditions, and usually, or not usually, but always, we find that words are a byproduct of thought. Thought is a byproduct of consciousness, if we can see it this way, right? So in every step down, there is a sort of dilution of reality. So try to describe in words what you're thinking. It's very difficult. Try to think about reality is equally as difficult, right? So this is returning us to that state of presence, to that state of no thought as we know it, or rather, no mixing our identity with thoughts. And that we can see the interplay as trying to define reality in a way that we believe we know what it is. And I love that they say, you know, right there, for us to talk about reality would be foolish because they haven't seen the beginning or the end. And it's impossible to see the beginning of the end because when you see something, it's already created, you see. But this last part is what really gets to my heart when they ask us, and this is just my interpretation of what I see here when they say what they're asking us, right? What do you have that may seek that you can trust more than your mind? So what is big mind, as we call it in Zen, right? What is awareness, as we call it in non-duality? You know, what shall be the master of your mind? Well, if mind is all that there is, then, you know, what is the master? The master is awareness. Awareness is aware of the mind. And so as we seek reality, I think it's beautiful, but just beautiful. It really gets to my heart when they say, ponder this question, you know?
That really caught my attention too, that question that they're asking, and that as you seek reality, we ask you to think about. I think the thought that comes to my mind is how much of our conscious thinking is really coming from programming in our subconscious and our unconscious mind that might have come from childhood experiences, maybe traumatic experiences, just the conditioning that we get from growing up in a society over the years, programming from our racial minds, planetary mind, archetypical mind. I think, as they have alluded to before, our conscious mind is kind of like the tip of the iceberg. And there's so much beneath there that we have no idea that I think controls so much of our conscious thinking. And I think maybe bearing that in mind and looking at that as we analyze why we think the things we think, why we say the things we say or do the things we do, it's a really fascinating challenge, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, and if I could just add something else in a practical aspect here is that, and going back to the sexual orgasm that is, the experience of the universe. Um, I like to bring Jonathan things um, to a practical level. How can I experience this sexual orgasm, right? That is the universe. Well, let's equate it with the present, right? And there is every time that we train our mind to be present, we're approaching this state, right? We notice this because it's so difficult to stay in the present moment. Our mind goes into, because of what you said, right? Our conditioned mind, it goes into a tangent, and that's where reality gets diluted. So every time we return to the present, we're training our own nervous system to sustain the impact of the present moment. It's unbelievable, but uh, it's very difficult for people to stay in the present moment. That's because there's so much energy right now. And so we are used to a very small portion of enjoying this. So every time we look back inside, as it were, just to remain in the present, that is the sexual orgasm to me. And it's just so strong, to stay there.
The present moment, that exact phrase comes up so many times in channeling transcripts. If one goes to the search engine on the LNL website and types in present moment, I haven't done it recently, but I would assume it's hundreds, if not more than a thousand times. It's a really important concept. And I would think it is a big part of Zen Buddhism as well, because what is the present moment? As soon as you try to think of the present, it's in the past already. So I think many times they refer to the present moment as it's a moment of timelessness. It's where all eternity can exist within that one present moment. And in that sense, yeah, I
Yeah.
think it is kind of like a lot what you're describing. Has that been part of your Zen Buddhist tradition as well? That being in the present moment?
Yeah. So one of the fascinating things about Zen to me is that Zen doesn't even references, anything else but reality as it is. So in other teachings and other traditions and methods, there's always a sort of concession to the thinker or to the separate self who is very convinced that reality is uh, it's a separate it's a conglomerate of things. And in Zen, there is almost like a direct um, let's call it ignoring whatever beliefs you may have about separation and just speaking from that point. There's not even a concession, at least um, in in the teaching that I follow. It's just one straight understanding of reality, and if you don't see it, they won't address you. So that's why Zen stories tend to become so funny, and they're so fascinating because sometimes we don't understand it. What are they talking about? I want my mind to be satisfied. They don't satisfy your mind, so they go straight into that. And to go actually to the law of one, there's only one or two sections where Ra talks specifically about enlightenment. And I could probably look it up, but just to paraphrase, they say enlightenment is of the moment. And in that same paragraph at the end, they say who can know when somebody will open the door to the present, So that's a mic drop for me.
It is totally very, very unpredictable indeed. I had another passage that I wanted to look at, and I think I might have actually skipped over it. Do you mind if we take a look at that one?
Yes, please.
This was from April 26th, 2008. And here Quo said, "Your culture does not encourage original thought. Your culture does not encourage inner directed behavior and attitudes. Your culture has a consensus reality which is endlessly materialistic. It is as though, with the sea all around you, your culture stands upon a tiny island and says, 'This is the world. Do not go to the sea. Do not dive deep in unknown waters. Here in this garden where there is food to eat and work to do, live your life. Question nothing, accept authority, and make no waves. Do not paddle at the shores of the unknown.' The culture in its consensus reality and our point of view is the illusion, and the water the reality. The creation of the small island is the pulling together of some gross material matter upon which to stand, and it is built by fear. At each instant of each of your lives upon planet Earth, infinity and eternity are as close to you as your breath, as near as your heartbeat. Each moment upon this seemingly solid Earth and its seemingly mundane concerns can open up in an instant to reveal the stunningly complexity, paradox, and mystery of the infinity of the moment. Land falls away, and the waters invite. Encourage and attract the seeking heart to escape the island of consensus reality and plunge into the waters of the noumenal, the unknown, and the wondrous." Anyone who knows me knows I love like making pop culture references to the law of one. And as I was reading this passage, the first thought that came to me was, oh, it's the Truman Show. Have you ever seen the Truman Show movie with Jim Carrey?
I have a couple of times, yeah. Love it.
So it makes me think of that whole illusion of manufactured reality of him living on the island and everyone trying to convince him not to leave the island to stay there in
Oh,
that
yeah.
comfortable reality. Oh, it reminds me of the Matrix, of course, and the idea again that the reality that we think is reality is just an illusion, and that below the surface there is a much deeper reality. The difference, I
And
guess, is that in the Matrix, the actual reality is this fucking horrific nightmare dystopian reality. And in the law of one, it's like the opposite of that. It's like what you're living in is actually seems like a nightmare. The actual reality is utopian, and it's beautiful that all is one and that one thing is love. That I just think is amazing. Did you have any
yeah.
thoughts, reflections on anything here?
Well, my first thought is to say that your initial reference I prefer than The Matrix, The Truman Show, as this, yeah, coming out of this um, created or manufactured reality. Now, the thing that I like to point out in terms of these reference that we make of, because we usually position ourselves as Neo or Truman, and it's to know that there is not other entities creating reality for us, is ourselves creating the reality. So it's all within our mind. So the Truman Island or the Matrix itself, it's our own mind. So we escape, or rather break the paradigms of our minds to open to see what is out there, what really is out there. And what we see is, as we say, in Zen, you probably have heard this 100 times. Before I knew anything about Zen, mountains were mountains and waters were waters. When I started knowing a little bit more about Zen, mountains were no longer mountains, waters were no longer waters. But then when I finally got Zen, mountains were mountains and waters were waters. That's what we see when we break out and we go into this uh, this moment, as they say, right? They say each moment upon this seemingly solid earth, right now, in our experience, right now, as we're talking, me and you, Jonathan, and its seemingly mundane concerns can open up in an instant to reveal, in essence, the moment, right? Stunning complexity, paradox, and mystery of the infinite. It's all in the moment right now. Um, there's something else that I would love to share. I don't know if you want to comment
Yeah, go
something
for
on
it.
this.
No, go for it.
Yes. So one other reference, like I said, and I'll probably keep doing this throughout our conversation. I just like practical stuff that is directly relatable to us, yes? And in the direct path, what we do is that we investigate the nature of our reality through direct experience. So at any moment, we can dive as deep as intelligent infinity, right? I know these words carry a lot of weight in our conscious mind because it seems to evoke an exotic experience or something beyond the mundane. But it actually is the opposite, and that's the paradox that our our basic reality, the nature of our being, which is awareness, when we penetrate into that, when we just, uh, as it were, just look the space between the thoughts, then we find the foundation of our being. And that awareness, that primordial awareness, is beyond time and space. There is no time, there is no space there. There is no limits. We find all the different descriptions that we have heard and read and learned. And interestingly enough, is the most mundane thing we can all relate to, our just common everyday awareness. It doesn't matter what it is that we are aware of. It is the awareness that is aware of that which represents reality. That's what we're sort of missing uh, or not going into, right? And that invitation for meditation, that's where it's at.
Yeah, and I think it really causes people to question what is indeed the foundation of reality. I think that first sentence that I highlighted in blue kind of sums it up. Your culture has a consensus reality, which is endlessly materialistic. I haven't like looked at any poll results on this or anything, but I'm guessing, yeah, the majority of people just kind of consider the material world to be everything there is, and that, we're made up of material atoms and molecules, and when we die, the lights go out and eventually our atoms bodies decompose, and that's pretty much it, unless you have a religious faith which believes that you have some kind of spirit which goes somewhere else. But otherwise, yeah, most people probably figure the material world is pretty much it, and if you can't see it and detect it with your senses, then it doesn't exist. But as we have been alluding to so far, that if you do take the time to explore that and look at the foundation of it, then everything changes. I mean, even scientists have said if you get down to the smallest subatomic level, it's all just basically energy fields. I mean, I believe that's what E equals mc squared means. It means matter ultimately is energy. So the whole idea of material, I think even scientists would agree, is kind of a illusion. It's a great
Yeah.
starting place.
Yeah.
Hey,
And
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, just wanted to mention something about this initial paragraph, which is how we, you see, the reverse thing here is that we believe that matter is the constitution or what reality is made out of. That's completely backwards because we think that matter creates mind, mind creates consciousness or awareness. That's totally backwards. So that's why, to me, this paragraph highlights that we live in a totally reverse view and consensus reality because we're not even invited to what the original thought. Our culture does not encourage the original thought. The original thought is in essence this initial. You called it the three first distortions, right? Out of these three distortions come the creation. So yeah, the understanding of materialistic view as a paradigm for our society is something that needs to be understood and digested as the complete reverse of what reality really is when we investigate into the nature of our being. And just as a trivia here, I come from a background of being an atheist and a materialistic scientist, or so I know what that feels. Everything that you describe precisely how I used to feel about reality. It's all matter. When we die, we die. There's nothing else.
So
So I
what?
know that feeling.
So what changed it for you?
Uh, well, let's say that when your belief, in this case, the belief that matter was everything that existed, gets shattered in your experience, that's when everything changes. I mean, you have to see it, especially somebody as skeptic as I was. Uh, I told you at the beginning of our conversation offline that it's a long story, but the short of it is that the universe, in essence, found a way to say, question this, and if you question it, you're going to find, and if you become skeptical about it, we'll throw you three more impossible equations. And if you try to question those more, so this is all to say that a chain of synchronicities, Jonathan, just unfolded in my life that I just couldn't deny anymore. And I said, okay, I want to find, appropriately to our topic, the nature of reality. That was my initial investigation. I wanted to get into that.
That's really beautiful. Thank you. I would love sometime to hear the longer story because I'm sure it is a great story. But at this point, I'm guessing there's more than a few people watching this who can relate to that, who have had, in their own way, similar experiences. Which leads me to another question that I wanted to look at with you, which is, can we ever know what reality really is? I had a passage here that I wanted to look at together with you. Actually, I have a few passages that I want to look at together with you. The first one was from October 8th, 1989. Quo said, humankind has, for all of written history, this instrument would say, tried to become wise. It has written billions and billions of words in many, many languages. It has thought many thoughts and proposed many proposals concerning the way things really are. Mankind has struggled to learn, to evolve, to believe in something that is real. There is a difficulty with that. Nothing is real. All that you experience, including your own personality, is an illusion, shadow, and distortion. On November 23rd, 1986, Quo said, it is our humble opinion that nothing can be known within the illusion which you experience at this time. And in a longer passage from October 15th, 1989, Quo said, if you could consider an ice that was not cold, but merely a skin over water, that is what your conscious mind is to the ocean of consciousness beneath the limit of consciousness. Those who have not yet asked what their purpose in life or what their purpose in eternity might be, skate upon that thin covering, thinking that is life. Indeed, it is a grand illusion, an illusion within an illusion many times. The truth is that there is one great original thought which created the creation in order that it may know itself better, and by the use of free will moved love, that is the one great original thought, into manifestation as light, and through the use of this substance, shall we say, or radiation, created all that you see outside of your physical eyes, all of it an illusion, and all of it designed to cause entities to make choices. Not simple and easy choices like what to have for dinner, but the grand and major choice of this density, to serve others in serving the one creator, or to serve the self, realizing that the creator is within. The creative is a subjective thing. We have found nothing but illusion, and yet still we seek the one infinite creator as we refine our path, as we become more rested, more trusting, more joyful, more relaxed, and more intent upon a single-minded goal of practicing the presence of the infinite one. We find, as we have said, that we continue to find ourselves in the divine discomfort of learning and the difficult and sometimes painful cleansing of the self, of those idiosyncrasies which are not necessary and perhaps are seen as stumbling blocks to consistent, persistent, and successful seeking to accelerate the rate of one's spiritual growth. It is well to be painfully and vulnerably in touch with the dynamics of this illusion, for the choice making is easier in the face of the facts. The decision to jump into the thin air of faith is made possible only because of an ultimate grasp of the fact that we understand nothing. All ends in mystery, regardless of where you pick up the string of phenomenon. The string always leads at last into the Mobius ring of eternity. Truth recedes before the seeker like a carrot upon a stick. I did not care for quote channelings when I first read them. I was wondering, I read the raw contact first, like a lot of people, and when I heard a lot of people referring to Quo, I didn't even know who they were talking about at first. And when I tried reading the sessions, they were just so long, I just did not have the attention span to get through them. But eventually, I really did come to appreciate the poetry of the language and the emotional content that's there that I don't necessarily get from Raw. So I really love the phrasing at the end. All ends in mystery, regardless of where you pick up the string of phenomenon. The string always leads at last into the Mobius ring of eternity, and truth recedes before the seeker like a carrot upon a stick. This is coming from entities who are like millions or hundreds of millions of years ahead of us in spiritual evolution, and they're saying, yeah, we don't know what it is either. It's a mystery to us. I just find that really inspiring and depressing at the same time. Did you have any thoughts on anything here, Gabe?
Oh, so many. Yeah, there is it's just that the fundamental thing about reality is that it can only be experienced. It could never be described, as we said already. And that's the paradox, that you can only experience it as a finite thing. So whatever that finite thing may be, it always leads back to that which originated it, which is, for ease of, and that's because in my own teaching, I just call awareness. Awareness is what we relate to directly in our experience, but just for the sake of relatedness, creator, intelligent infinity, all of these are, very close to this experience that we call simple awareness, limitless awareness, pure awareness, big mind. And just to, to talk a little bit more about um, that understanding that we can understand anything, if that makes sense. There is a passage in the Law of One, in the Raw Contact, where, and I'll read it because I have it here, and I think it's beautiful. It's completely related to the work that we're doing in third density, right? And this is from session 16, question 39, where Don says, I am assuming it is not necessary for an individual to understand the law of one to go from third to fourth density. Is this correct? So we're talking about, just for context here, we're talking about graduation, harvest, or just evolution, right? Is it necessary for us to understand the law of one to move? And I love the phrasing. I'm always very particular with Ra's language because um, they don't speak more than they have to. And every time they say a word, to me, it's a very valuable word in context. They said it is absolutely necessary. I mean, absolutely necessary that an entity consciously realize it does not understand in order for it to be harvestable. This is the classic part when they say understanding is not of this density. So yeah, it's absolutely necessary that we um, consciously realize that's not the classic, well, I don't know anything. I'm fine with not knowing anything. No, you have to consciously realize that you cannot understand anything. That is what makes you actually graduate to fourth density. Isn't that paradoxical?
It is, but for somebody who's a fan of Zen Buddhism too, it's like it's all in the paradoxes for
Yeah.
sure. It is a beautiful thing, and I know they have said many times that this is not the density of understanding. And there's so many times when in quote channelings they'll say something about understanding, comma, for lack of a better word, because they just realize none of us really understand any of this stuff. It's very humbling, but a good reminder of what reality is, and that is it's just beyond our understanding. Which I guess begs the question of, so what's the point of all this then? Why are we here if we can't understand anything? And I like how they bring in at the end that you're here to make a choice. That really is something that I've really never seen anywhere but in the Law of One and the teachings of our friends from the Confederation, that life is not random and that you do actually have a reason for being here. And although each of us have our own reasons, our own meaning of life, the meaning for all of us really is to make that conscious choice of service to others, service to self. Whether or not we're aware of the law of one or anything, but at least to consciously choose to think of others just at least a little bit more than we think of ourselves, or to think of ourselves 95% of the time at least, and not think of anybody else more than 5% of the time. That is kind of the point of this and what's needed to advance to the next level of spiritual evolution, recognizing the Creator in others and in ourselves. That's a really beautiful thing that I've never seen before.
Yeah.
When did
And
you discover the Law of One, Gabe? How long ago was it?
it's going to be 5 years now.
5 years. Nice.
Yes. I was sort,
That's fairly recent. Me too. I only discovered this about 4 years ago.
yeah, there seems to be a big shift that happened at that time. A lot of people were called into this, and I know this. I guess maybe I'm very limited in my perspective, but I feel that at the moment that I started um, broadcasting my channel and talking about this, a lot of people also started to come, into this seeking, into this, and I mean the seeking of the law of one. So it just seems like a lot of people started finding it, and yeah, I'm not sure what happened there. I'm not trying to understand it, but
Well, that's good. That's not going to.
yeah, yeah, I got the message.
The quarantine really was a big thing. I mean, talk about
It
a
did.
huge global catalyst and something that seemed like a really negative catalyst for so many people that I've spoken with was really a positive catalyst in the sense that it really was something that triggered a spiritual awakening for them. Maybe through the law of one, or maybe through some other spiritual teachings, but for them, it was something that's helped them realize there is more to life and more to this reality than what we have been led to believe. It's
That's
beautiful.
congruent with my experience too. And I'll like to say something about this one question that you mentioned that I hear often too, which is, we get into that point of saying, well, what's the point of reality then if I can't understand? And I'm going to reference again Ra when there's a part where they say that the creator does not properly create as much as it experiences itself, which to me, in my way of synthesizing the message of the purpose of reality, the way I see it, especially seekers, we initially become very interested in the process of evolution. So we put it as a priority, right? Evolution, I need to evolve. But when you look at it in the grand scheme of things, in the greater model of reality spoken in the law of one, evolution is a given, Jonathan. Like evolution is not something that we're not sure if we're going to evolve. Oh, trust me, you will, because there is infinite time and experiences are to be had in a way that will always contribute to evolution. So evolution is not the purpose of the creation. Evolution is the mechanism of creation. So the purpose of creation is actually experience. That's the whole purpose as to why what did the creator want? What was the original thought? To experience itself, to know itself, right? Through experience. So that's the purpose. And when we understand this, then we say, so any experience is valid? Absolutely. Every single experience is completely valid. And this goes back now into inner work and say, but what about the wrong things that I did and how I judge myself and how things people, this starts to, bring up all these things that just need to be released in order for us to be an open channel to more experience. So I could go on a tangent here, but the point is that once we fully realize this, everything just starts to open. And you know that if the momentum of the creator is to have experiences, now think about this for a moment. And all we have in our minds, as you said, are conditioned patterns that we continue to reinforce. What we're doing is not living new experiences, but actually reliving old experiences. Well, trust me, the force of the universe is pushing you in a way that it's going to cause resistance because you're not providing new experiences for yourself. And the experiences that you want are not the ones in the past that are still, gnawing at your mind, making you feel depressed and anxious and so on. You want to snap out of this, so again, it just lays out the foundation for spiritual work, as we call it, which is just liberating your mind from all these constrictions.
Indeed. Yeah, and I appreciate what you're saying about evolution and spiritual evolution. I probably haven't told you this yet, but yeah, I was a high school biology teacher for 36 years and just retired recently. So, from the Darwinian point of view of evolution, which I still agree with as far as it goes, from the Darwinian perspective, evolution happens, it's inevitable, but it's a random process. There really isn't any particular goal or destination in mind. And that's what I find fascinating about the law of one. It affirms that evolution happens throughout the universe and that there is, in fact, a goal, there is a purpose for it, which is eventually reunification with the one, I would say is it, and to continue spiraling upwards, growing towards the light, just as plants do, you could say. And that's a fascinating thing. And to think of, the next step in our evolution is to become a social memory complex, to become like a single planetary consciousness. That's something I think I had somewhere maybe deep in mind as a possibility before, but I don't, it definitely was not until I read about the law of one that I saw that expressed in specific words that way. And that's a beautiful thing to be able to see that there is a big picture to the evolution of humanity. And it is a really good, beautiful thing. It's really nice.
I would love to know more about how you digested this process of evolution, because I always look at the two missing links that we find, which the law of one provides, like between first density and second density, right? There's a missing link that we in chemistry we say, how did organic molecules become alive? And then the second missing link is what we are provided also in the law of one between second and third density. How did we become self-aware? So I would love to know more about, and we don't have to do it now, but I'm just expressing my desire to see, how through your mind with all this, 30, I'm going to say 32 years that you had in biology before you found the law of one, how did this kind of click within you?
Yeah, 36 years. And I think, as I have mentioned elsewhere on these podcasts, that being a high school science teacher really taught me to look at everything with a healthy dose of skepticism. So reading about channeling was kind of a new thing to me. I had read books about people who claimed to be mediums and communicating with spirits of deceased persons. And I'd worked with Native American medicine people who seemed to be able to communicate with spiritual beings. So that part of it wasn't particularly new to me. And I've always had kind of a spiritual bent. But yeah, the whole idea of the evolution thing and the missing links, I think there was at least one or two passages I read where they were suggesting that that is kind of how you could say the archetypical mind designed this density on this planet, so that there would always be mysteries for them to connect the dots and for us to be able to see exactly what happened with the Martian transplant and how like non-living matter became living matter. It would be almost like making it too easy for us, it would seem. So there's always an element of mystery to it. And I think that's just something I've always kind of picked up on and kind of realized that that is part of a good philosophy of life, is just knowing when to let go of what cannot be understood. So yeah. I appreciate your asking. Yeah, yeah. For our viewers, this is the first time that Gabe and I have met. So this is really the first time that we've actually had these conversations together, and we're just getting to know each other. Hopefully not the last time. We'd love to have you on again.
Definitely not. Yes.
Yeah, until then, I did want to go back to something that you kind of alluded to earlier in our discussion, which is how much, in fact, do we create our own reality? One passage that I wanted to look at here on April 14th, 2007, Quo said, "Each entity makes its own reality. If you do not like your reality, you are able to change your reality, for you are one with the Creator. And that goodness and love, which is the very nature of creation, is at the heart of every cell of your body and every atom of each cell. Your very nature vibrates with the infinite love and light of the one Creator, and you are a creator in your own right, not greater than any other creator, but able to choose your reality and to see it into manifestation. We are talking about power at the level of changing the vibration of your being. For as you tune your thoughts and as you persevere in that outworking of faith within you, you can become a part of the shift of thinking that lightens not only your vibration, but the vibration of the entire planet." And there was another passage from February 8th, 2020, not that long ago. Quo said, "The thoughts that a seeker thinks are the basic representations of the seeker's being. They are the most important feature which, when balancing is continued or begun, may be considered first. The thoughts have a power that comes from within the being that may be seen as developed during the incarnation or even being pre-incarnatively originated. The thoughts then begin to reflect the seeker's attitude or perspective upon the world. This attitude determines how the world is experienced. Thus, the thoughts that one thinks are the signposts or guidelines which are, shall we say, filled in by experience in the daily round of activities. Thus, if one wishes to manifest a certain quality within one's life pattern, it is possible to hold the image of the desired manifestation in thought and meditation and draw unto one that particular quality or thing. There is also the strong possibility that what one fears is also drawn to one. Thusly, it is well to take care with those fearful thoughts that may hold some type of sway over one's perception in any particular area of endeavor. It is well not to act out of fear or to react to fear, but to balance it with the knowledge that each is the one infinite creator, that there is nothing to fear, for all is well. We all live and move and have our being within a creation of unity." Yeah, manifestation seems to be kind of a popular thing these days. The idea that you can manifest something into being by thinking about it or doing some sort of ritual practices. And it's interesting to see that, yeah, there is indeed truth to that. And I believe it's been said more than a few times that as we continue to transition from third density into fourth density, that we will see that increase the ability to manifest thoughts, because in time space thoughts are things indeed, and that veil is going to be thinning. So it's a fascinating thing to contemplate. It
Yeah.
reminds me again of another pop culture reference. Did you ever watch the original Star Trek series, Gabe?
That I didn't.
Oh, okay. Well, then I think I'll just skip this. But for any of our viewers who have, there was an episode of the original series called Shore Leave, where the crew of the Enterprise gets to go down to planet basically to kind of take a break. And they start realizing that all sorts of terrible things are happening to them, and all sorts of terrible things were things that somebody was thinking about at some point. And after a couple people die and all sorts of other like negative things happen, this guy appears and tells them that they are actually on a planet that was created basically for recreation and for amusement. And there's a technology there that does actually allow people to manifest things into thoughts. So they could have manifested positive things. It's just that for whatever reason, they just kept thinking of negative things that were manifesting. So it's just a funny parable, metaphor, I guess, for reality, that you can manifest positive or negative things.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that, Gabe?
Yeah, there's actually, just to finish up your reference. I've heard, I never watched Star Trek, but every time I hear somebody make a reference to Star Trek, I know that I'm going to listen to something pretty elegant and sophisticated, well, way beyond its time. Because yeah, Star Trek doesn't, it always delivers. So thank you for sharing that. It's one of those things that I don't think I can get into at this point in my life, but it's one of those things that it's not a regret. It's probably too harsh of a word, but you say like, wow, how come I didn't get into Star Trek back in those days? So,
Because you got better things to do than watching TV, apparently.
oh, I
Did you
did.
know that Don Elkins did actually meet Gene Roddenberry?
Oh, he did. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I found this out through Jim or Morris Hoagland, who is the vice president of on the board of L&L Research and who's a regular in our Zoom sessions. But yeah, I think Don had a film that he was trying to get made, and somehow he had connections or made connections with Gene Roddenberry and talked to him and shared what he had known up to this point. And this was in the early to mid 60s when
Oh,
he was
wow.
still doing a lot of UFO research, but they had made telepathic contact, I think starting in 1962. Anyway, the point being, he did share with Gene Roddenberry whatever he had came up with. So we don't know how much of that might have influenced Star Trek, but certainly the whole idea of Confederation versus Klingon Empire certainly seems to uh, have echoes of the Confederation of Planets and the Orion Empire and the whole thing
Yeah,
about the Prime Directive and not wanting to violate free will. It seems like a very law of one thing too. So
there's
that's
definitely
all you need to
some
know about Star Trek, Gabe. Everything else is just, yeah.
there's definitely some influence there, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so if I can, this is to me one of those fascinating topics, manifesting reality. Um, and there is one of my favorite books for anybody who's interested in Zen, Shunryu Suzuki, in his book Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. Um, there's one portion that's really stuck with me when he talks about the levels of creation. Now, bear in mind, of course, that Zen is by no means a metaphysical study, right? That there is no metaphysics in Zen. So to listen to somebody talk about the levels of creation uh, in Zen, especially a Zen master like Shunryu, um, is beautiful because we see the immediate practical aspect of seeing creation manifested in the moment. So he talks about, zazen, which is sitting meditation, and how in zazen you're just sitting and there's nothing. There's only the moment, right? And the moment you come out of zazen, there the whole creation is created in one single moment, right? Right away, everything comes alive, everything comes into being. And this is true. I mean, just sit down for a moment, watch all the thoughts go away, see what remains. And then all of a sudden, you see that everything is automatically created. All three first distortions are automatically activated. Yes. So this is the first level of creation. The second level of creation would be something like making tea or building something, just doing something creative in the world, right? That's the second level of creation. And then the third one would be to nourish yourself with information, study, and so on. And he says that society has forgotten about the first level of creation and only attributed creation to the second two. And so they're disconnected from God, and he references the word God actually here because he's talking to the Western world. And we forget about that first level of creation. If we do that, then we get disconnected, as we have been reminded over years. We get disconnected from the creator. We get disconnected from ourselves. And we think that we are the ones creating the world, you see? So a lot to take in there for me, because when we talk about law of attraction and manifestation, we're thinking about these two things. What can I do to shape my reality the way I wanted it? But no, you're forgetting that you are the initial creator, and that whatever is supposed to be in your path, it's already present right now. You just gonna have to be in tune with that, you see? So yeah, I don't know if you have thoughts about this, but just wanted to share that part.
Yeah, I appreciate that. No, that's new to me. And I have to admit, I think it is something that I'm still grappling with, this idea that we create our own realities. Every time somebody says that to me, whenever I'm expressing, I don't know, issues with something, I think there's always a little bit of me that the hairs on my neck bristle, or I kind of want to resist that because somehow in my own mind, I think I still haven't really totally accepted that or totally really understand it, for lack of a better word. But
Yeah.
it is the truth. So I think it's really just a matter of mind coming to terms with it more.
Can you?
I think that's one of the things that I appreciate most about the law of one. That again, I was a philosophy major in college. My spiritual awakening happened when I was in my early 20s, and that was about 40 some years ago. So I didn't really grow up in any Christian or religious tradition, but always had a spiritual bent, always had an interest in things of spiritual, philosophical nature. So I've studied a lot of different religions, a lot of different spiritual paths, and read a lot of great readings and books by different spiritual teachers. But I think that is one thing that I really came to appreciate a lot about the law of one, the idea that all is one and that all is the creator. It's something that I think I knew intuitively already. I just hadn't really seen it, certainly not in any of the Christian teachings or Islam or Judaism or anything like that.
Yeah.
And the idea that you are the creator, and not only are you the creator, but that other person that you're looking at is the creator, and everything is the creator. Every single iota of every particle of everything that you experience in front of you is a hologram of the universe, is a hologram of the creator. And it's just one big original thought. It's one big cosmic mind. That is something that I think took everything that I've learned up to that point and all tied it together in a way that finally made sense to me. So it's a beautiful thing, for sure.
Yeah.
I
Can you
forget,
go
did you
back?
grow up? Did you grow up in any particular religious, non-religious? Oh, no, you said you were an atheist. So was your
I
family at all religious?
No, I actually have the last remaining photograph somewhere. I have it on digital form. When I am my um, in my suit, I think I was doing the first communion. I think it's what it's called in Catholic Christianity. And I was a very devoted kid to the Bible and to God, not to Jesus. I somehow it was, I mean, Jesus was a great figure, but to me it was just God. It wasn't Jesus. It was just God. And that's the point where I would say I reached my maximum level of devotion as a child. And then, of course, science came into my life, and I said, okay, well, I saw all the things that religion had been doing in the past and history. I kind of got exposed to the reality of history and the past of religions. And then with science, I just said, well, okay, this makes a lot more sense. It's tangible, it's real. That's when I moved from being a very, uh, I would say, pious kid to moving into a teenager, a rebel teenager, moving into scientism, which I maintained for at least 20 odd years until I had my spiritual awakening at 36. But yeah, I had some exposure at the beginning of my life, and I cherish it because I fondly remember how devoted I was to God, to the idea of the divine, and this whole notion. It was a very pure, innocent way of looking at it, which is perfect. But I guess my mind was primed to learn about reality, and what I'd learned about reality didn't match with religion, and that's what disconnected me and yeah, had me go through this path. But yeah, it was a beautiful,
So what did
beautiful
it feel
upbringing.
like when you discovered that Jesus was kind of a big thing in the Law of One?
Um, it was very well, I had conflicting thoughts because I had already created the idea that, Jesus probably didn't even exist, and to me, existence was all that mattered, right? So it was a little conflicting. But then when I started to read on Jesus's message, and I said, like, oh, so Jesus knew the law of one, not as the law of one, but what the law of one represents. He knew about unity consciousness, and he knew about oneness in general, and that's what he was talking about. So at that point, everything's just started alleviated, and I actually have him here in the back of my altar, Jesus and Buddha there. And I'm very minimalistic with the things that I keep in my sacred place. But yeah, he had to be there. He was such a I relate to him so much at this point. I do. I really do.
That's beautiful. Yeah, it was a surprise to me. I did not grow up in a Christian family or upbringing, but I did start going to church when I moved to Seattle in the early 90s because I didn't know anybody here and thought it might be a good way to meet people and thought I would give Christianity a try. And yeah, love Jesus, love the teachings, love the church that I met my wife in, got married in, raised our kids in. But around 2019, I think I decided to leave the church after after being politically active for a while and after 3 years of Donald Trump as president. Sorry to get political here, but yeah, it was just a very difficult time for me. And in my mind, in the reality that I created in my mind, I saw a lot of what I perceived as negative things happening in the world that seemed to always have conservative Christians somewhere in the middle of it somewhere. And I just decided I really didn't want to have anything to do with that team anymore. So I left the church. Still love Jesus. It was just, and I still do. It was just the church that I kind of had issues with. So I left and I discovered the Law of One about a year after that. And I was horrified to learn that Jesus was such a big deal in the Law of One. It's like getting a divorce and like joining a new club somewhere and then finding out that your ex-wife is like really popular in that club and everybody talks about your ex-wife. It's like, what the fuck is up with this? I was trying to get away from this. But I did come to terms with it, did come to peace with it. And no, I still love Jesus and I still love how there were so many Law of One teachings in the Bible. You just don't necessarily think of them that way because they are mixed in with a whole bunch of other stuff too. But
Yeah.
sorry,
Can
that was
I?
a little bit of a digression there.
No, I'm actually interested because of the timeline when you say that you finished in 2019 your relationship with the church, but did you find the relationship between ending in 2019 and then 2020, the Law of One came in? Was there an active part of your seeking that was looking? What was happening there?
I've always been seeking. Like I said, my spiritual awakening started about 40 years ago, and when I started when I was a philosophy major, it was just something that I was always interested in. I think every day for the last 40 years I have spent investigating, trying to understand the mysteries of life. So when I left the church, I just felt like I had kind of decided to close the book on that particular chapter. And I just continued on with my seeking. And it happened again during the pandemic because we were in quarantining and I was teaching high school biology from this room that I'm sitting in right now. I was teaching high school biology on Zoom, which was hilarious in itself. And actually quite a bit of fun, but we'll save that for another time. So no, I had a bit of extra time on my hand, and I was watching Ancient Aliens on TV at the time, and saw David Wilcock on, and seemed like an interesting person who seemed to know what he was talking about, and read a few of his books, and that's where he talked about the Law of One quite a bit. So, like a lot of other people, came to the Law of One through David Wilcock, or Aaron Abke, or someone else. So,
Yeah.
how did you discover the Law of One? How did that come about?
It's a really good question because when I that chain of synchronicity that I describe as my spiritual awakening, or I like to call it my calling. I had a calling from the universe to say, look in this direction. And I guess the best description is that if you can imagine me living in a box, which we call science, materialistic science, and I was a rigid thinker, a rigid believer of this, and suddenly, these walls, ceiling, and floor blow away, and I find myself, just floating in this new universe, lost. I have no idea what the universe is now because everything that I thought it was, it isn't. So I said, I need to find, what reality is then. If I had it wrong, then what is reality? So yeah, to me, it was like, I don't know, grabbing a Christian, and this obviously doesn't happen, but to a degree it may happen, but grabbing a Christian and saying, I'm sorry, Jesus was made up. It doesn't exist. How do you deal with that? You find like you have no ground, no foundation. So I remember asking the person who was a sort of guide for me at the moment. Um, he kind of knew a lot more than I did, and I asked him, recommend me a book that I can read that would have everything in it to satisfy my curiosity about the nature of reality. And he said, read The Law of One. And of course, I ignored him for months.
That's
I
great.
said, but you know what happened? It was that I opened the book, and this was the original books, right? And I started reading the intro, which I forget who I talked to um, in LLM research, where they said, yes, we're actually thinking of removing the introduction because it's kind of outdated. But yeah, I started reading, and it was like, channeling? Nah, I'm not going to read channeling. I don't believe in that. Channeling, like, no. So I kind of put it on the shelf for months until I was actually called to jury duty on October. It's almost like the universe said, this guy's not going to read this.
This guy has time on his hands. Yeah.
Exactly. So I was there just in those long waiting moments of just hours waiting there. And I opened my phone and I had the ebook and I said, you know what? I'm just going to go to this first session. But as soon as I started reading Ra's eloquent language and description, it was just like I was trapped. Needless to say that within months, I remember my wife was reading A Course in Miracles, and she was making some great parallels with me in the Law of One. Like both of us were exchanging and bouncing off each other. And she was trying to read the Law of One as well, and she said, like, I don't understand it. And I said, well, it's it's not so difficult. This is what they mean, and this. So she was the one that actually, in a way, promoted me, not promoted, but incentivized me to open this channel and just start creating the raw material as I did. Um, yeah,
That is
so
such a great story. Yeah.
I'm
Well,
glad you
thanks
like
to
it.
your wife on that one, and thanks to the government for putting calling it a jury duty. That
Yeah,
was, and it's just funny to imagine that this was all pre-incarnatively planned, and that you had to go through all the other stuff that you did before that to prepare you for the law one when you did.
I believe
But
that.
that first session, yeah, for sure, that really caught my attention too. You are dancing thoughts in a ballroom with no material or something like that. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, that's good stuff.
I actually have a joke that I say that Ra, they were uncertain if they were going to continue channeling with them. And so in the first session, they said, all right, let's give them everything that they need, one single answer, one single, text. And if you read session one, you get everything, It's just like, wow, there it is.
It is. Yeah, that's a great way to think about it. I had not thought of that. But yeah, that first session for sure, and how it must have felt. There
Yeah.
was another session well after that, I think, where somebody asked Quo if they get tired of answering basically the same kind of questions with the same kind of answers over and over. And they said, we weren't aware that we could do anything other than answer the same questions the same way because all is one and that one thing is love. It's like everything you say after that is really just kind of another way of saying the same thing. But it's just a beautiful set of spiritual teachings that just continues to provide more and more gems of love and wisdom as I read them.
Yeah. And I'll just say one comment on that. I was just reading, actually, just listening to Rupert Spira, who I appreciate so much as a non-dual teacher. And he was talking about, the art of formulating a question. And he says that he's never heard the same question twice. It's always been, a different question. So, you never get tired of answering the same question because you never get the same question twice. So I thought that was very insightful.
No, indeed. And even the answer is different every time you answer it. And you're not the same person that you were when you hear the answer the second time that you were the first time. So, yeah,
Yeah.
it's a beautiful process. If you don't mind, I would like to take a look at another passage that really has to do with the question of how do we get along with those who have different realities?
Let's do it.
This was from a session, and this is going to be a long one, from February 8th, 2020, not that long ago. But Austin was asking this question, and Austin said, if the effect of our thoughts on our reality is increasing, it seems like that creates some sort of disorientation for our society, as people all have their individual beliefs and stories. And I would guess that has something to do with the seeming increasing separation and polarization in something like our political sphere. Can you give any advice on how to navigate this sort of new landscape where individual people's realities are becoming more and more solidified in their own perception, and how we can interact with others when their reality seems so different from our own? Quo said, each entity has its own pattern and time of awakening. Those entities who are more successful at allowing their pre-incarnative choices to manifest within their life patterns find that there is a freer flowing of energy that occurs when they are able to do this. This intelligent energy flowing through one's being, then, is not obstructed by any blockages of convoluted or distorted thought patterns. This allows the seeker to move in a more harmonious fashion with the energies, thus energizing the positive desire to be of service to others. Those upon your planetary sphere who do not consciously have a spiritual path of seeking have certain configurations of mental activity and patterns of thought which are also increased or solidified by the intelligent energy streaming to your planet at this time. This is in accordance with what they have chosen for their life pattern at this time. The intelligent energy is simply an indifferent, neutral magnifier of what is. Thusly, the choices that have been made by each person upon the planetary sphere are likely to be enhanced so that they may go further in that direction as a function of their free will choice. If at some point the distance they have traveled into that type of thinking becomes uncomfortable for them, they are always free to choose another path. And this is what is possible for many upon your planet at this time, for they have, over a period of many years, been used to the control of media advertising, or governmental policies, or peer pressures, or the various ways in which the third density cultures exert pressure over their peoples. Thusly, that which is becomes greater as it is affected by the cosmic instreamings. And when you see yourself moving into interactions with such entities, it is well to keep in mind, firstly, that you are seeing the Creator standing in front of you, that this Creator has made certain choices that it may or may not be aware of. Certain choices may be causing a various kind of disorientation or pain or anger or jealousy or of many other types of emotions, so that they are at the mercy of their own previous choices. A great deal of compassion may be felt for such entities, for they know not what they do, and yet they continue to do it. If you can give your love in some way that supports what you see as the core of their being, that is the Creator in human form, then you have done all that you can do in the way of relating in a fashion that is helpful and is truthful. There is oftentimes the desire to suggest certain changes in their behaviors. If this is asked for, it is possible to aid in that way as well. However, to offer advice that is not asked for is not usually helpful. Really good personal advice from the entity known as Quo. And definitely this is something that I am working on myself for sure. And I really love the discussion of how, whatever thought patterns one has tend to be solidified by this in-streaming of what they're calling intelligent energy. So if you have already been polarized in service to others, then you're going to feel more locked into that thought pattern. If you really haven't chosen any path yet and are just kind of bouncing around in between, then that thought pattern is also reinforced and solidified. I just find that a fascinating way to look at this, and a good reminder not to be judgmental of others who, for whatever reasons, have different ideas of what is real from one's own. Any thoughts on this, Gabe?
Yeah, I actually see also this overlapping with the previous topic that we were talking about in terms of manifestation. And the way I see it is how, well, first of all, let's begin with the creator. Always begin and end with the creator, as Ross says, right? So in our thought exercise here, if we see the creator as that intelligent infinity, which is infinity becoming aware of itself, and once again, we find awareness as the foundation of experience, then we see that obviously every thought that exists is creating reality. Or, in other words, reality is being filtered. Reality is a neutral, let's call reality intelligent energy at this point, right? So, intelligent energy or reality is filtered through our minds, we say. So, our mind is really what's creating reality. Reality exists neutral from anything, and our thoughts are the ones filtering it through. Of course, you mentioned beautifully the choice, let's call it. We're at that point in which we may be cycling thoughts, and I think they mention it at the bottom with anger and all these emotions that kind of trigger when you are frustrated, confused with reality. You don't know what's your mission, your purpose, your place here. These are all always coming out of the confusion of not knowing what we are. However, when we do take one path or the other, we're doing it in a uh, in a very honest and convinced way. I think that the word is convinced, faith, right? So moving in that direction, our thoughts are the ones that are being changed, you see? So our life doesn't really change per se, but rather our thoughts are the ones that are changing. So now we're filtering reality through different thoughts, a different mind. And that is the changing. That's what I call, the law of attraction to me, is that as you begin to follow on the service to others path, which is just, you mentioned it beautifully too, right? Thoughts about myself, 95% of them are going to create this bubble of ego or separate self that can actually move on in the creation up until a certain point where there is dissolution, the point in which the separate self is no longer useful or it's no longer viable, let's say. But at the bottom, when we make the choice of service to others, is the opposite. We're relinquishing this idea that I am a separate being. Rather, I recognize that I am all that there is, and everybody is all that there is. So we're all one. You see? So by this realization, and the more we invite this is the percentage that I see moving at 51% or more, in which there is a dissolution of a separate being. Service to others is automatic at this point because there is no you, or there is less of you to be taken care of, right? And so the percentage really just, to me, refers to the absence of this separate being, separate self within us. So what happens? Our thoughts are simply aligned with the inertia of the universe through you, and we can call this, your pre-incarnative choices, whatever you resonate with, all of this, right? The unfolding of your true being or true manifested being. That's what moves in. So I think that's
That's an
where we
interesting way to look at it. I can't say I've ever really thought about it that way. I mean, I've definitely heard about the dissolution of the ego. I just think if I was understanding what you were saying correctly, it's like I'm not sure how one can go more than a minute or so in one's daily life without being aware of oneself as an ego, and then thereby thinking back to one's own desires and needs and wants and welfare as opposed to the welfare of others. Is that something you're able to do on a fairly regular basis in a daily life, to just not really be thinking of self as ego, as self?
Yeah, so this is a really good question, Jonathan, because this is one of the things that I put at the forefront of my teaching, and is to understand what the ego really is and what our individuality is. You see, so I call this, and this is just for reference for people who are into the investigation of what we are. There are three levels of identity, one being the core. That core is awareness. Everybody is aware, thus, everybody is awareness. We're all the same being, right? We can all identify with that. Are you aware? Yes. Am I aware? Yes. Everything is awareness, right? So that's the first level of identity, our foundation. The second one is how that awareness appears in the moment. And that appears as an individualized portion of that awareness. In other words, me, the way I am, So all of us have an individuated characteristic, right? We have a sort of shape and form, and we have an inertia. All of this is our authentic being, you see? This is the one that gets confused with the ego, because the ego is simply a reflection. You see, identity or awareness looks at itself, right? And it can identify itself with the limited, individuated portion that it is. That generates a reflection that we call the ego, you see? So it is absolutely possible to live without reference to the image that you are and be your authentic being all the time. This clears up one of the many questions that pop up by saying, am I supposed to renounce all my desires and the things that I want to do in life? The answer is no. You just have to identify which desires are coming from the image of yourself, which are always based on scarcity, limitation, fear, and so on, as Kuo said in the previous one, or I think it was here, based on fears. You can live with that. That's the ego.
Right.
Or just be in line with whatever you are, the desires that come naturally from you. So yeah, it's a really good question.
Yeah, wow, beautiful answer, beautiful explanation. That all makes perfect sense. I just never really thought of that before. For any of our viewers who want to learn a little bit more about these things that you're talking about, do you have a website of your own that we could send folks to?
Yeah, I'll definitely share it with you. It's Gaia Awakens will lead you there. But I
Nice,
have a Spanish one. It's all the same.
nice. So if we Google search Gaia Awakens, Gaia Awakens, should be able to find.
Yep,
Great.
absolutely.
There you go, viewers. Go to it. I had one more question that I wanted to look at in a couple passages, and this relates to how can we discern reality from illusion, truth from falsity? Here's where we get really serious here. In a session from December 12th, December 22nd, 1996, Kuo said, the hallmark of the spiritual inquiry of the seeking and searching after truth, of the thirsting for righteousness, is the darkness, the perversity, the inability to see clearly that is typical of a world that is in darkness, in which the only light is the light of the stars and of the moon. The one this instrument knew as Dawn used to say that the moon was more important than the sun because it gave light in the night when you need it. This is very true. It is into the spiritual night that the light, so dim yet so precious, of discernment must come. It is not in the noonday of consensus reality when choices seem clear, but rather at the midnight, the dark night of the soul, which in some levels goes on all the time beneath the tempo of your everyday life. It is as though the greatest of treasures was hidden in a darkened theater or a darkened field. If within a theater, then it is not simply the audience, but those upon the stage that gaze about and look for that hidden gem that is truth. If within the field of night, then we might bring that parable that this instrument has from its Christian education of the merchant who sold all that he had to buy a pearl of great price. That pearl lies buried with the field, and it is the decidedly unglamorous job of the seeker of truth to dig in the dirt. Now, each of you has a different way of approaching the dichotomy, which is sometimes not clear and is sometimes excruciatingly obvious betwixt the second density great ape physical vehicle with its attendant mind and emotions, and that consciousness which was before all began and which shall continue after all has ended in the stream of time and space. This kind of is a great echoing of what Ra talked about when discussing the matrix of the spirit in session 80. They said, you may with some fruitfulness consider the possibilities of moonlight. You are aware that we have described the matrix of the spirit as a night. The moonlight then offers either a true picture seen in shadow or chimera and falsity. The power of falsity is deep, as is the power to discern truth from shadow. The shadow of hidden things is an infinite depth in which is stored the power of the one infinite creator. The adept then is working with the power of hidden things, illuminated by that which can be false or true. To embrace falsity, to know it, to seek it, and to use it gives a power that is most great. This is the nature of the power of your visitor, and may shed some light upon the power of the one who seeks in order to serve others as well, for the missteps in the night are oh so easy. Then in session 80, question 10, Ross says, the nature of the spirit is so infinitely subtle that the fructifying influence of light upon the great darkness of the spirit is very often not as apparent as the darkness itself. Few there are which are successful in grasping the light of the sun. By far, the majority of adepts remain groping in the moonlight, and as we have said, this light can deceive as well as uncover hidden mystery. So much to unpack in this one. I'm going to go straight to you, Gabe, on this one. Any thoughts on anything from either of these passages? For some reason, your mic is muted. Do you want to unmute your mic?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I was saying that, just echoing what you said, there's so much depth into what we can go here into, just understanding what the darkness, this primordial darkness that is. I think I like to bring it to, again, practical terms, to know that it's interesting because what we see as reality is actually a hiding of the self, a hiding of the creator. So what we look, and this is, I guess, another poetic view of looking at the world as illusion, is that what we see is just the hiding of the infinite light. So we have shadows, so we have darkness, form, shape, right? All these things are simply the nature of manifestation. In other words, infinity could not know itself unless it limits itself. And that by just the fact of limitation, it must see that which is not. So everything that it sees is that which is not, because for it to be able to see it, it must be limited. And infinity is obviously unlimited. So that is just a little, I would say that is the primordial darkness that needs to happen. And because of this is what at the beginning we were talking about, Quo referring to the fact that we cannot understand reality because what we see in reality is always a shadow. So, you know, this can lend into so much of the spiritual work of what it is to seek that which, funny enough, and it seems all reverse, paradoxical, when we look at the self, what do we see? Void, darkness, sunyata, you know, emptiness, which I love that right around the session 80s, they said, we will correct the word void for plenum. That's a beautiful change, because we look at the creation as void, but in truth, it's plenum. When we look at ourselves, we don't see anything. We see just nothing. but that there is no nothingness. Ra says this also in session 6, when they say the dissolution into nothingness is the dissolution into unity, for there is no nothingness. So yeah, this primordial darkness can be seen that way. And, like they said, it would be fruitful to consider the little light of awareness that we have in order to explore reality. Does that make any sense to you, Jonathan?
Yeah, I just wasn't aware of that. The reference that you made to session 80 when they said they will say plenum instead of void. That's really fascinating because they are kind of like opposites. I mean, void is emptiness and plenum is fullness. And the idea that you could think of what we think of as emptiness as fullness. It's a really beautiful thing. I don't think I had seen that before. So I thank you for sharing that. I mean, it reminds me before the Law of One, I wasn't aware that there was life outside of planet Earth either. I had figured conceptually, yeah, sure, it's a possibility. But to realize, as our friends in the Confederation have said many times, I mean, not only are we not alone in the universe, but it's actually a really crowded universe. In fact, it's like, wow, that's just a really fascinating and again, beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing to contemplate. I think it's that phrase at the bottom, the groping in the moonlight thing. For some reason, that phrase just really stuck with me and resonates with me. This whole idea that I think, as you kind of said before, this is not the density of understanding, and we chose to come here and incarnate in third density behind this veil of understanding that so much is hidden from us. We really are kind of like the best of us are like groping in the moonlight, and none of us really can ever know what reality really is, and we're all just doing the best we can with what we got. I think that's just an amazing, beautiful thing.
Yeah, and if I can add also the fact that if we go into the study of the structure of reality as we perceive it, bear in mind that I mentioned that there is a primordial darkness that needs to happen in order for the creator to experience itself as an entity within itself, right? Meaning, just regular entities in an unveiled environment. Yes. So we have knowledge through the raw material of the pre-veil experience, right? That was still under the primordial darkness, right? And also we have knowledge of other entities, social memory complexes, which are in the primordial darkness and yet not veiled. So first to highlight the fact that these unveiled entities, they still experience, as we read here too, thanks to your beautiful synthesis of excerpts of these channelings, they mentioned that they still don't, they can understand the creator. They're still moving towards the creator, right? Because they're still in that primordial darkness. So moving to our third density, where there is a veil, and this is what we call the extension of free will that Ra explains, because now we have the capacity to distort even more, the possibility of this darkness. And so we find ourselves in a very convincing reality that shows separation. In the past, pre-veil, this was not the case. I mean, separation was an understandable feature of reality, and we knew, okay, this is how we experience ourselves, but we're all the creator. Here, it's very convincing that we're not. And so separation seems like the ideal form. So that part of what you say, groping in the moonlight, that's because we're talking about the archetypical mind that exists only in third density experience right now, definitely on planet Earth. So yeah, groping in the moonlight it's a perfect reference for this.
And yet, also, we've been told that the majority of the population on planet Earth is actually incarnated from other planets, near and far, some of which have very different archetypical minds from our own, which explains why we seem to have such a hard time communicating with some of our fellow creators, other selves in our society, because, yeah, they have very fundamentally different ways of looking at reality, no less legitimate than our own, and that's just fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Gabe, I think we are coming near the end of our time today. Did you have any last thoughts on these couple of passages before we start tying things together?
Um, can we move back to the quo? Um, I don't know if there was something that, um, uh, yeah, this, I guess to me, just to follow their reference to, again, I think you did a beautiful job at referencing the matrix of the spirit, and to know that what, at least to me, the spirit the cycle represents is that coming in contact with intelligent infinity, getting in touch with the true self, and to know that to do that, it seems like it's, like I said, it's very convincing to believe that we're not doing anything because we're so veiled. It seems to be hidden, right? That gem that is in the dirt. Um, Meditation to me is the way to dig in that dirt. Meditation, the disassociation of ourselves with the thoughts, whatever thought it may be, even if it's beautiful thoughts, doesn't matter. All thoughts, just I'll let the mind run on its own. That to me is the most efficient way to dig in the dirt, to find and look at that light that is behind form. So yeah, I just wanted to share that because I feel that the darkness that we see actually is just our own minds always, and it's not even darkness, it's just so fascinating. Our minds are just so fascinating. We love it. So a moment of rest makes us actually appreciate even more our thinking mind. So we're not in conflict with ourselves. We're here just to see more the beauty of, yeah, this which I am. I think sometimes we may get a grim look at the prospect of spirituality, but no, it's the opposite. Is I think you mentioned this, and I can't remember your words, but it's just to become more aware and see more beauty in the world rather than the opposite. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful way to say it. Thank you so much, along with everything else you've articulated so beautifully and eloquently today. Putting in a plug for meditation, always a good thing. Our friends in the Confederation seem to have a really big thing about meditation. They recommend it like, yeah, all the time, thousands of times over the years. So I agree. It's a good way to dig into the nature of reality and discover there are many beautiful gems of love and wisdom to be found there. You just have to be willing to do the decidedly unglamorous job of the seeker of truth and to dig in the dirt without too much effort. Well, I want to thank you so much for being here. And I did want to note to our viewers that we did do a podcast episode, number 6, I think, on the archetypical mind. So if you want to see more discussion of the matrix of the spirit, as well as the other 22 archetypes, I invite you to check that out on our YouTube channel. Otherwise, this would be the part of the episode where we try to sum up what we've learned here and figure out, well, where do we go from here? So a few takeaway lessons that you might consider. One, really are to be encouraged to keep seeking reality, to keep seeking the truth, to know that there really is a lot more to reality than you might think, and that there is great rewards and treasures to be found in the seeking. And as Quo said, ask yourself, what or who shall be the master of your mind? Take a look at why you think the way you think, say the things you say, do the things you do, and see if you can take a look at some of that programming there that might be in your subconscious, and realize that everyone creates their own reality, and we are kind of like robots that have the ability to change our own programming. You have the ability to do that, just have to be willing to do that. And of course, recognizing that everyone creates their own reality and trying to convince somebody to agree with your version of reality. I can tell you from my own experience, probably not a really great thing, not really helpful for anybody in particular. As our friends in the Confederation have said many times, we're not here to change the world. We're not here to save the world. We're not here to change anybody else. We're here to love them as they are unconditionally. That is the lesson of fourth density. That's what we need to do in order to continue our growth and evolution. And lastly, the universe begins and ends in mystery. Even our friends who are millions of years ahead of us in spiritual evolution haven't figured it out yet either. And yet there are so many rewards that come from the seeking. So just encouraging you to keep on seeking. Gabe, do you have any last thoughts, reflections on anything that we've talked about today?
I think you summarized it so beautifully here, Jonathan. And I love that you picked that part of our paragraph, even before we even talked about it, right? Point two, with what or who shall be the master of your mind. If we tie in everything that you said here, like I can just see this beautifully, all your 4 points into the investigation of our true being, into the essence or the nature of ourselves. You see, it all starts with seeking. Um, and I find that funny because there is this Sufi mystic who said, what we talk about here, I'm paraphrasing, but what we talk about here cannot be found by seeking, yet only seekers find it. So it's one of those paradoxical, again, points in which, you'll never find it through seeking, but because you're a seeker, you will find it. The way I phrase this is your seeking must start so it can come to an end. Once the seeking comes to an end, you're there. Don't start it again. And this is something that you can repeat over and over every day, every time. Meditation, whenever you're doing anything in life, actually. So that seeking of reality, keep it always, as Ra said, will and faith. Will and faith. That seeking will go right to the truth. What is the master of your mind? Well, what is prior to the mind? What precedes the mind? What's always there before the mind even says anything? Yes? We all create our own reality because that is the nature of the mind. And as we explain here, it was beautiful also in our conversation, the mind is what filters reality. And what we see as that supposed void or the plenum, which is ourselves, that's the beginning and that's the end. And there is a mystery because the mind cannot plunge itself into it. When it does, it dissolves itself. When it comes online again, it tries to look at it and it sees nothing, only because the mind can only see objective reality, and there is no objectivity to the essence of what we are. The infinite cannot be seen, measured, numbered, or abstracted. So that's the greatest mystery. We are the greatest mystery, our true selves. That alone just makes us appreciate life, like we said, from black and white to all the infinite colors that are possible.
Such a beautiful way to say it. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for being here. And yeah, learning to love the mystery. That is something that I think we can all continue to do for the rest of our lives.
Mm.
Well, wanted to thank you again for being here, but we are not finished here yet because, as you know, as I mentioned before we started, there is a little thing that we like to do on these podcasts that's called a pop quiz. Pop quizzes, as you know, was a expression that Carla liked to use to refer to the little tests we get in our daily lives to see if we have, in fact, learned the lessons that we came here to learn. And here we like doing pop quizzes at the end of our podcast, just to add a little bit of fun and levity to our otherwise serious discussions and to tie in a little bit of pop culture to our discussions of the Law of One. So, yes, we have already made more than a few references to the movie trilogy, or I'm sorry, the series of movies called The Matrix. And I believe you said you have seen a few of these. So today, I have 3 multiple choice questions to ask you about this iconic movie series from pop culture. See how many you can answer correctly. Viewers, if you're watching, you can go ahead and just say your answers out loud. We can hear you through the screen. And as always, the points don't matter. If you had fun, you won. And if you learned something interesting about the Matrix movies you didn't know before that you can drop into a conversation with friends or family, then you also won. Are you ready for your first question, Gabe?
I am ready.
All right. Your first question is, Which of the following actors was the first choice to play Neo instead of Keanu Reeves? Was it A, Johnny Depp, B, Brad Pitt, or C, Will Smith?
I'm gonna say Johnny Depp.
Nice. Did you know
Was
that, or
that?
were you just guessing?
I think my subconscious heard it at some point. I just fished it
Nice.
out.
Nice. Yeah, hard to imagine anybody but Keanu Reeves playing that role. But
Yeah.
yeah, apparently Johnny Depp was the first uh, choice because he was well known at that time and well known for taking on fairly quirky roles and such. But
Mhm.
I think he was busy doing something else at that time and wasn't available. Brad Pitt and Will Smith, I believe, were also asked to do the part, and I believe both of them turned it down. So worked
Really?
out well for everybody.
It did.
Are you ready for your second question?
I'm pumped, actually. Let's see it.
You're doing good. You're doing good. You're doing one for one. In which city were the Matrix movies filmed? Was it A, Vancouver, British Columbia, B, Sydney, Australia, or C, London, England?
Oh my God. I'm gonna go with Vancouver, British Columbia.
Any particular reason?
I just don't get a vibe of Australia and definitely not England.
Interestingly enough, the correct answer was Sydney, Australia.
Oh, it did. No
Yeah,
idea.
as usual, it was for money reasons. They were having a hard time getting funding for the movie that they wanted, and all three of those locations have generous tax cuts that enable studios to record there. That's why you're right. A lot of Hollywood movies are, in fact, filmed in Vancouver, British Columbia, and
That's
in
what I
London
thought.
too, I think. But yeah, Sydney, Australia
How's
was where the vast majority of scenes from the movie were filmed.
wow. Is London really that permissive with allowing production
I
companies?
think so. I actually wrote this pop quiz a while ago, and I believe at the
Oh,
time that I wrote the quiz and I was researching it, yeah, I believe London, England was listed as a friendly place because of tax cuts or whatever financial
mhm.
incentives make it
Wow.
worthwhile. I don't know. Probably have to Google up like what movies were filmed in London, England to see if that's true. But we will save that for another time. Are you ready for your last question?
I'm ready for it.
Your last question. The Matrix movies have been described by the directors as a metaphor for humans being what? Okay. A, transgender, B, wanderers, or C, artificial intelligence?
That's a nice choice of options there. I'll say artificial intelligence, although I would love to see wonders.
Yeah, well, I'm sure they would not have used the word, but
Yeah.
interestingly enough, the correct answer is A.
No
And I did
way.
not know this until I wrote this pop quiz that the directors of the movie, the entities formerly known as the Wachowski brothers, came out as trans women. One
Yeah.
of them in 2008 goes by the name Lana now, and another one, the other one in 2016, goes by the name of Lily. So apparently, trans people really picked up on this idea of having a double life and this desire for transformation. The idea of having
Wow.
a true identity beyond your physical form, an ideal self that you can seize control of from an uncaring system via the internet. And
That's pretty
apparently, the
profound.
red pill that Neo takes is similar to what estrogen pills, which were used in hormone replacement therapy, looked like in the 90s.
Wow.
Isn't that
That
trippy? Isn't
was
that fascinating?
that is, I mean, I would never have guessed the metaphor for it.
I would not have either, but apparently trans people did pick up on that. And apparently, yeah, the directors were well aware of it and intended it. And apparently there was one of the characters that they did actually intend to be male in one of the realities and female, I think, in the other reality. But back in the early 90s, the studios weren't really going for it, so they
Mm.
changed. And the rest is history, as it were. Gabe, I really, really want to thank you again for being here. It has been such a joy hanging out with you, and I really hope we can do this again. Did you have any last thoughts or reflections you wanted to share with our viewers before we say goodbye?
Just actually with them and you, just say thank you. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for being interested in this path. I know it's an automatic thing that we have, but what you're doing here is beautiful, and I can feel it because it's like feeling with family. It's just talking, relating, just enjoying, and even more than family or added to family is just that feeling of friendship, of just being in relationship with something that you find so beautiful in your life and that you're willing to share and enjoy together. Like that's what I appreciate the most out of this whole conversation. It's just the opportunity to share time with you. It's been great. It's been nourishing, and I just appreciate your light, Jonathan. Thank you for doing this and for sharing it with everybody else. I mean, if you would have done this with just me, I would appreciate it. The fact that you're sharing with others, like Ross says, that's your service, and that's a beautiful service. So thank you, man.
That is high praise coming from you, my friend. It's a really, really a joy and an honor and a privilege for me to be able to hang out with you and get to know you a little bit better. I know you have done so much over the years already in service to others, and hopefully you will be able to continue doing that for many, many, many years to come. I want to thank you for all you've done and continue to do in service to others. And to all our friends at L&L Research, thank you for all you've done and continue to do in service to others. And for whoever is watching this video in the near or distant future, thank you for all you've done and continue to do in service to others. We are sending you our love, light, and receiving yours. Until next time, in the love and light of the one infinite creator. Adonai. Namaste.